She's like, when I first became an intern, I probably learned more from her than the other 370 some Master Gardeners we have.
Gosh.
And you're fun too. So she's going to be speaking to us, teaching us all about Perennial, some for the sun, for you Edina folks. She's got gardening and dry shade. So we'll just learn and chat and feel free to be casual. Just interrupt anytime with questions, and we're going to let her go at it.
Thank you, Colette. Thank you. And happy birthday, Colette. I didn't realize it was Colette's birthday today. As Colette said, I am a Hennepin County Master Gardener since 2000, and I'll give you $5 later for saying all the nice things.
Oh, okay.
So she told me total lies, told you total lies. On your table I have handouts for you, and on the half sheets of paper I don't have evaluations, but if there's anything you want me to change about the presentation that you like, that you didn't like, that I should have covered, you can feel free to do the evaluations on there, because this isn't really a Master Gardener presentation, so it's not official, but it is my presentation. Today we are talking about gardening on the dark side. And I will touch on, if you want, dry sun later too. But if you have any questions at any time, feel free to raise your hands, give my attention, chew your food, and then I will call on you. So we'll just get on to it then. So gardening in the dark side. The goals tonight are to define what shade gardening is, dry shade gardening. What are the challenges and the benefits? And when I say benefits, people say, oh, there's nothing you can grow. Why would you think there's benefits? But I find there's tons of benefits in dry shade gardening. Tips for gardening in dry shade, and some plant choices. So what is dry shade gardening? It could be gardening under large trees, gardening on the dry side of buildings under overhangs. It's in the shade, and also gardening under shrubs. Those are all dry shades. This is a picture of the side of my house, and I am not a pretty gardener. I am a let things grow where they grow garden, and I'm not very regimented in my gardening, and so what grows, grows. There's a sidewalk between the ferns and hostas, believe it or not. Now, I live in South Minneapolis, and I had kind of an evil plan with this sidewalk. Sometimes kids run through the backyard. And I don't really want kids running through my yard. This is on the side of my house. Most city kids see green and they run the other way. So there's nothing under here. No. So because they can't see the sidewalk, they're less likely to run over it. If it's wet, if it's rainy, if it's dewy, it's icky. And so that's like a subtle protection. This is now all changed because I just put in a fence. But it looks beautiful, and I had a neighbor on the other side next to me who would water this religiously for me because my hose did not stretch around here. So I told the plants, grow, lucky, good for you, but she would water them, so they were very lucky. So the challenges, you have rain and snow shadows. When you have an overhang, it prevents the rain and snow from getting to the ground. Also, trees prevent the snow from getting to the ground. So that is why it's so dry under trees. Obvious, maybe not. You also have root competition. And here we have, this is a picture out at the Arboretum of the evergreens, and trying to grow something under that evergreen would be virtually impossible. It's dark, it's really, really super dry, and that evergreen has all of the nutrients being taken up from itself. Anyway, you couldn't see the plant, so you wouldn't grow anything under that tree, obviously. Shade often has poor soil or compacted soil. Then you have issues like slugs and mosquitoes, not so much fun for us. And shade gardening means it's slower to warm up in the spring. That could be a benefit, or that could be a detriment. It depends on how you look at it. So the benefits of gardening in dry shade. You have shade. Oh, thank goodness. When those hot summer days, you get to garden in the shade, it's like 10, 15 degrees cooler. It's wonderful. You're not getting sunburn, you're not getting UV rays, you're gardening in the shade, it's nice and calm. It's cooler. There's less weed competition in the shade. Most weeds like the sunny stuff. There's some weeds, but not a lot that like the shady. So you have less weed competition. Any seeds that grow there are less likely to germinate. Most weed seeds need sunlight to germinate. So if they're not going to get sunlight or a good dose of sunlight, they're never going to germinate. So the dandelions can blow in, and most of them won't germinate for you. There's shelter from weather extremes. If you're gardening under a huge tree, that tree is not only protecting the plants from the hot sun, but it also could be holding heat in the fall so that you don't get the frost as quickly. It also protects from hail, and heavy winds and the heavy rains that could just smash plants right down in your beautiful sunny garden as your roses and your lilies are smushed by the heavy rains and your hostas still look beautiful. It's possible frost protection. Things are slower to thaw in the spring. So if you have those plants that are maybe a bit iffy and gee, if they come up too soon and we get that late frost, they're dead. If they can grow in the shade, this is a great place to get that little extra protection. Maybe they come up 2 or 3 weeks later, but they come up and it's past the freezing time. There's less water, so you have less runoff. So you might not have as much runoff or loss of topsoil there, but there is less water too. And you have microclimates. So there's a lot of benefits for dry shade gardening. Another thing is you can plant mint. Like this is a spearmint, and you can plant mint in the shade if you're brave, and it won't be quite as aggressive. However, if you don't like your plants to be kind of rambunctious, still plant it in a pot in the shade. I would love mint to take over my whole yard, but I'm the exception to the rule of 99.999% of gardeners. So I'm always sad when my mint doesn't take over.
Get ready, Dinah. The kids in their vegetable gardens want mint all over your shade bed.
But you know, when you're weeding mint, it smells so good and it's refreshing. It's just.
I'm gonna let them have it.
It's a plus. It's a plus. Gardening for dry shade. Mulch is your friend. Here, Mother Nature mulches under the trees. It's already hard to tell, but this is out at the Arboretum. If you're going to mulch over tree roots, add it in shallow layers. Do not suffocate the tree roots. Layer plantings. Don't think just two-dimensionally. Don't think just a bunch of hostas. Try to think of 3 dimensions. You want to get some height in there, some difference, some depth perception. I'm a big fan of permaculture, and I don't know if you know what permaculture is, but permaculture actually says there's 7 different kinds of plants you can grow in your garden. You can grow big trees, understory trees, shrubs, perennials like your herbaceous plants. You have your ground covers, you have your vining plants, and then you have the plants that grow underground. So you have 7 different layers that you can think of filling up. And just think of filling up every little bit of space you possibly can. So the places that are open really shine that they're open, and the places that are full of plants look lush and rich and beautiful. And consider your 4-season gardening. It's not just like you could go out to your garden tonight. Well, maybe not tonight because it's kind of dark, and you wander around your garden with a flashlight in the middle of winter. The neighbors will probably call someone to lock you up. So wait until it's a little, light. But go out to your garden and see, what does your garden look like now? Those are the bones of your garden that's showing. That's what's really where does it need some work? Get those bones in. And when you fill up that 3-dimensional and get those bones of your garden in, your garden then takes on a stature of being professionally done, looking mature, looking in place, looking planned. Add compost and soil amendments. You can never add too much compost to your garden. Always add compost to your garden. Feed the soil. If you have a healthy soil, 90% of the time your plants are going to be healthy. They will be able to resist those slugs. They will be able to resist those whiteflies, those aphids, the deer munching on them. They'll have a better chance at being healthy if they have that basic health, basic rooting in the soil. This is one of my favorite shade plants. This is lemon balm. Now, if you lived in the south or in warmer climates, people would probably tell you not to grow lemon balm because it can self-seed everywhere. But it grows wonderfully in dry shade, and it doesn't self-seed too badly, and if it does, you just deadhead it. As with any of your problem self-seeders, it's simple to just deadhead them, and you don't have to worry about them self-seeding. It's the easiest thing to do in the world, but it smells so good. So when you're out in your garden, think about where you're going to be brushing by and plant those fragrant plants like your mints, your hyssops, your lemon balms, your lavender, your rosemary, not rosemary in the shade, but your mints, your herbs. So when you brush by them, your plants can give you a little perfume and tell you, hello, I'm glad to see you, my friend gardener.
And that's what y'all drank in that iced tea I made last summer. That was
lemon balm.
In there, lemon balm.
It's it's so wonderful. And actually, this is called Melissa officinalis, and Melissa, I believe, is Greek for bees. Mm-hmm. So it's a wonderful plant for the pollinators. All of your herbs are, and it has pretty flowers. So tips for dry. If you need to water, I should have told you this in the beginning, and I probably should have come clean with Colette about this. I'm the laziest gardener you will ever know.
Amen, sister.
And no, you're not lazy. You're just way too. But so I don't water. The only things I water in my yard are my containers, and then if I'm doing straw bale garden, maybe I'll remember to water the straw bale garden, if it's lucky. Normally when I plant something, it will get a good drink of water when I planted it. And I just learned a tip. When you're planting a plant, dig the hole, water the hole, fill up the hole. Let the hole get nice and soaked with water. Put your plant in, give it another drink of water, fill it up, and then do a little bit of watering, and then you can walk away. You have saturated that soil with water. And it's good. The roots won't, the soil won't pull all the water from the roots, and the roots will have a nice moist thing. But water the hole first, and then put your plants in. But that's a tip beside this. So dry shade gardening, if you must water, drip hoses and soaker hoses are wonderful drip irrigation. It's a nice way to keep the water where it is. You don't lose it to evaporation. And if you're using like the hose on the left-hand side, you can cover that with mulch and leave it out 365 days a year because it will not burst. And if you cover it with mulch, hopefully the squirrels won't eat through it. They sometimes get into it, or they're looking for water or something, so sometimes you have issues with that. But it's nice because you can just, and be hiding it in under the mulch, you prevent your protecting it from the UV rays of the sun so they'll last longer. So even if you have a sunny garden where you're using soaker hoses, put it under the mulch and you can add a few years to your drip irrigation, your soaker hoses. If you want to put containers, you need those pots of color. Consider putting all your containers together. Do big containers, put them all together. It's one place to water, and then you don't have to lug the hose everywhere. Plus it makes a bigger show than a little container here, a little container there, a little container there. However, if you do want a spot of color, put a spot of color in. A bunch of hostas, raise up that, lay a pot down, face top down, put another pot on top of it filled with impatiens, and you have a pop of color in your hostas. If you must have color out in the shade because you think it's too boring. If you want to grow those plants like a stilby or ligularia, can you tell I've been talking customers all day? Grow a bog garden. Dig a hole, put some, brain just went, not the floating roll cover, the black plastic down, the landscape fabric. Put the landscape fabric down on the bottom of the hole. Maybe put a little sand and clay. Fill it up with soil, and then when you water, that water will be held there a little longer and will stay a little moister. So if you have really dry shade, you can still grow some of your plants that are really water hungry, and just they'll be a little more boggy. You're not going to grow cattails or lily pads or anything like that in there, but maybe ligularia would work in a stilbies if you have issues with dry shade. Add some water features. This is just a simple bowl filled with leaves that fell down. I thought it looked really pretty. Bringing water features in, the still water will reflect what's up above, whether it's leaves or clouds or moonlight. It can be just entrancing to see a bowl of water reflecting a full moon at night if you're sitting by it. Water will also bring in the critters, the birds, the bees, the butterflies. If you do want butterflies and bees, and squirrels and deer and raccoons and birds and everything else. If you're looking to protect the pollinators or some of the butterflies, float a few sticks on there and they'll land on the little sticks and they'll drink the water and they won't drown as quickly. Add some benches. Every garden needs benches. Your shade garden especially needs benches. Benches say, sit, enjoy, hang out with us plants. We're friends. It also adds a sense of welcoming to your garden, and it's a good place for the gardener to sit. And I know gardeners never sit. You go out to your garden, you'll sit down for 2 minutes, and all of a sudden you see a weed. You start, and 3 hours later you're still weeding, and you went out to the garden to just spend 20 minutes. But maybe you just spent 5 minutes, but you had to sit on the bench for 5 minutes. Okay, maybe 3, and then you start reading. But have another bench and work your way over to the other bench and sit for another 3 minutes. And add some garden art to your yard. Consider spring bulbs. You know, the shade in your garden, in your shade garden, is not the same all the time. It is different. In the spring, you don't have shade in your shade garden. It's maybe a dappled sunlight, so you can grow some beautiful things. The earlier they bloom, the better they'll come up for you because there's less leaves on the trees. And if you plant under things like honey locust, which leaf out really early, you can even plant some of the later spring blooming bulbs. So check out when your tree leaves out. If it's an oak, hey, we can plant under there, you know, pretty late spring bulbs. Some of those early maples and some of those trees that come out really early, plant the really, really, really early bulbs because they leaf out so early, the trees do. So in order of how they bloom are the Kyandoxa, and I say this the way I say it, and I know they're wrong, the Galanthus, the Lycojum, Narcissus, Pushkinia, Scylla, and Winter Aconite. Although I think Winter Aconite should be way at the top. I think that's, maybe I have them reversed. No, that one should be blooms. But they're ephemeral. They'll come up, they'll bloom, and they'll disappear. So remember that they may leave holes in your garden, something that you may have to think about filling later, or maybe plants to cover over. And the great thing is about dry shade gardening, spring bulbs love dry summers. So don't overwater them. We lose a lot of our spring bulbs because we plant our pretty perennial or annuals over them, and then we water the heck out of our annuals and wonder why everything rots out. Spring bulbs, like your tulips, and a lot of those come from mountain areas. They come from really dry, arid, hot, dry things in the summertime. Woodland natives. There's also our ephemeral, like your Virginia bluebell or bloodroot. There is bloodroot planted under here, but it's already gone. This is under a small cherry tree. Already gone. But the alpine strawberry, or the alpine strawberries are coming up there. There's some alpine strawberries on the far right, and I did plant some kale because every garden needs kale everywhere. Trout lilies and trillium all come up and then just often disappear. Barrenwort or epimedium is one of my favorite fall shade plants. It makes this beautiful mounding plant. Pretty orchid-like flowers, tiny orchid-like flowers in the spring. Gets this beautiful heart-shaped leaves. Often there's little red around the leaf, and then in the fall they'll get a coppery color. They're just beautiful. They have a nice fall color. Monarda, bee balm. Some people say, oh, bee balm, it takes over my yard, oh my gosh. Well, it won't take over your yard in the shade because it's going to be fighting to survive. In the shade, make sure it has a lot of breathing room because it does tend to get powdery mildew. And if you have plants that are getting powdery mildew, there's some things you can do. You can plant ones that are resistant to powdery mildew. You can make sure that there's circulation around the plants for powdery mildew. You can do some judicial pruning. So instead of just having a clump of bee balm, you cut the outside down by about 1/3. So you kind of have like a tiered effect. You're letting a lot of air circulation in. You're putting staggered bloom times in, so you're getting more blooms from the same plant. They're different heights of blooms, and you're letting a lot of the powdery mildew not hang out there. Yes?
When would you prune them?
I would try to prune them before January or before July 4th.
Okay.
So give them a good pruning. Any of the plants that you need to like keep down to size, like your asters or your bee balm or your sedums, cut them down by 1/3 or 1/2 by July 4th. They have time then to bloom for the rest of the season. You'll still get the blooms.
For us autumn joy sedum people.
Yeah, and those floppy plants, don't feed them. You're being too nice to them. They're like me. You don't want floppy plants like me. You want those lean, tough plants that are fighting for every bit of nutrition. Don't feed your perennials. They don't need that stuff. Make them be tough.
Honestly, we're not using this asthma around here anymore, people. I'm just telling you.
Well, you know, if you have a healthy soil, your plants get what they need from the soil. By giving them a lot of fertilizer all the time, it's like giving them McDonald's all the time. And it's not all that good for them. But if you want to give them a boost in the spring, that's fine. Or when you're just planting them after they've rooted out, that's fine. But really, if they had 3 square meals a day, which means they have a nice compost-rich soil, they'll be much happier. They don't need to go to McDonald's once a week, once a month. Another one of my favorite plants for the shade, also works in the sun, is the bleeding heart. The fancy ones, the Dicentra eximia, and I'm No, I'm saying that wrong. I love King of Hearts. It's one of my favorite. Blooms all summer long. Gets about a foot, foot and a half, by about a foot high. Little pink blooms all summer long. Mine even reseeds throughout my whole yard, which is way cool for me. You know, the bee balm, can't get it to grow for the life of me. King of Hearts, I can get growing everywhere. Coral bells, there's millions of, okay, there's only probably 1,500, well, maybe 1,000 different coral bells. There's a lot of different coral bells. And you know, you can play with the color of foliage just fine. The little flowers, even though they're so tiny, they'll attract hummingbirds, even to your garden. So plant a bunch of them and the hummingbirds will come. And they're just so pretty. So the coral bells, they're really beautiful. And coral bells are one of those flowers that gets crown rot really easy. So if you have a heavy clay soil, plant it so that you're planting just a little above grade. So the water always runs away from it. And if you mulch, pull back the mulch in the spring. So that they don't get crown rot. Pull them back so that crown stays nice and right. Your hostas could do that too if you have a heavy clay soil. Always plant a bit higher in those soils. Another favorite plant, and you should plant this all over your hill, is geraniums. We have a native geranium. There's all different kinds of geranium. The leaves have a fragrance to them, whether you like it or not, I don't know. But they get big, they get beautiful. They take absolutely no care whatsoever. Once you get them planted, they're gorgeous. And they'll bloom all summer, especially if you deadhead them. White, pink, purple, go for it.
Do you have problems with yours flopping over?
Nope. Mine are in that really tough soil on the side of my house where I don't water, and now my neighbor has passed away from brain cancer, so nobody waters them anymore. And those babies they're just supposed to be this monster plant. But I don't have problems with them flopping. But it depends too on maybe which one you're growing.
I agree, I should plant that, Teresa. So am I going to get some more from Julie Weisenhorn or from you?
Yeah, you could.
We're going to go digging at Teresa's place.
We'll see how lots of mine is sitting in bags above ground right now because it didn't get replanted after the fence, so I'm thinking I lost most of them.
Oh boy.
We'll see, who knows what happens. Some ferns will work in the dry shade. Ferns are not just for humid and wet areas. The Christmas fern will stay evergreen even under the snow for you, hence its name Christmas fern. But a lot of the ferns will be beautiful in the shade. Goat's beard. Again, there's a short one and a tall one. Great in the shade, gives you that little pop of the plume of white color. Even once they're finished blooming, it's a brown, but it still is a different thing to look at in the shade. And it does look pretty. And mixed dried flowers could be a really pretty thing if you do crafts with dried flowers.
Just take that first still.
They do.
When I've done
The
presentations,
leaves are.
they say, "Let's not
it
long
does.
and
It does
still be."
look. Yeah, it's tall. It kind of has a stilby like flowers, and it kind of has a stilby like leaves. Totally different plant, but it is. It does look, and it doesn't need the water that a stilby needs. Jack in the Pulpit, great for your garden. Cool flowers in the summer, they're okay, but I love wandering around and saying all of a sudden in the fall I'm going, what is that red stuff? Oh yeah, Jack in the Pulpit, I forgot it was there, because early summer was so long ago and my memory is so short that all of a sudden I'm surprised again by another thing in my garden, so it's so much fun. But they look really cool and they're really fun, I think. Lady's Mantle is another beautiful shade plant, great for the edging of your garden, a nice mounding plant. I absolutely hate the color of the flowers, but I know lots of people love the color. I love yellow, but that yellow-green just is not my favorite. But I love the leaves because the leaves hold the dew like diamonds. And they're just beautiful. It's actually one of those herbs that was a lady's herb, which is why it's called lady's mantle. So it has a rich history of an herb. It does have the chartreuse flowers, not my favorite. Monkshood, extremely poisonous. Do not eat monkshood. Don't eat it, but it's beautiful. There's an early blooming one and a later season blooming one. They're absolutely beautiful. If you have a problem with werewolves, you can use monkshood. That will keep them away. And then you've got your garlic right in the front, so you can keep your vampires away. Little vervain, and you will be set. Nothing will come after you. But in this case, this is part of my messy yard, so I have some maidenhair ferns in there, some Canadian violets, which take over the world, Canadian ginger, and epimedium. Canadian and Canadian, those are really tough plants. So Minnesota, they're going to laugh at our winters and take over your yard. Just a subtle hint there. And then the monkshood, and they just are a nice combination. And there's St. Francis in there hiding amongst everything.
Where's St. Francis?
There's St. Francis. He's right that gray thing,
I see.
between the two monkshood. There's a little. He's facing the other direction. Kind of got overwhelmed by the plants there. So, yeah. Pig squeak or Virginia, another really fun plant. It has these rich cabbage-like leaves, and they'll do great in the sun. They do great in the shade. Pretty flowers in the spring. They'll be evergreen under the snow. They get a little red color in the fall. They're beautiful. Pink or red spring color. And they're great edging. Really tough plants and kind of cool looking.
I have a question about those. So I bought some of them at the farmer's market.
Uh-huh.
And I think I've been in my garden for like 3 years and they're still just like weedy.
Yeah, they don't grow big. They're not
Those
a
look
big
big.
plant. Yeah, and I think maybe they just take a while. Maybe did you give them a little side dressing of some compost? Tell them you love them.
Yeah. Do I
Yeah.
water them too much, you think?
You might. Yeah, I wouldn't overwater them. Yeah.
I just like saying, what is that? When people ask me, "Oh, big squeak."
Because I guess the leaves kind of squeak, but who's going to rub the leaves and break them like that? I don't know, but apparently some evil people did, so now they call it pig squeak. Solomon seal, really cool. Big plant, can get 2, 3, 4 feet high, beautiful arching fronds with the white bells hanging down. They're so pretty. It gets a pretty cool fall color too. I think personally it's kind of cool looking. I'm not the best photographer, so what I think is cool doesn't always translate into my pictures, but it's in my mind. It's still beautiful. You can do the variegated one if you want to add that pop of color to your fall, and then it has the blueberries too. So you have all these different beautiful things that this brings to your garden. Turtlehead or chelone, blooms into October. I mean, what else? With a little. It's wonderful. It gets tall. It's like a shrub in your garden that dies to the ground every year and comes back. So it's like it has a presence, and it's just beautiful. And I was thinking, it's really nice, but I don't know. I'm into the pollinator thing. Maybe is the pollinator's going to get there. Well, here I see the bee fighting its way, and it's like, okay, the bees like it. All right, fine. So it got to stay. But they actually do look like little turtle heads. They're kind of cute. There's the white one and the pink one. Hot lips, or the white one, is a native. So if you've got a native plant, your native pollinators or insects, or somebody's going to be enjoying it. It has interesting seed heads, and they again can make a nice winter interest, or make nice if you do crafts or anything like that. But again, this plant blooms so late into the fall, so it can really give you that pop of color when all you're seeing is the rust and the orange and the reds, and let me have a softer color, and then you have the pretty pink. Or if you just need some pink, sometimes you just need pink. Zigzag goldenrod, really cool plant, likes the dry shade. It's one of the solidagos. Goldenrods, hello, goldenrods, and the stems actually do zigzag like that. It's a very light zigzag, which is why it's called zigzag goldenrod. It's really cool, and it's one of those yellow plants that's going to bloom beautifully in the shade. Wonderful. It is a native, so it's beautiful. It's nice and tough. Gets maybe 2-3 feet tall. Very beautiful.
Fast pollinators, according to Shirley.
Likes yellow native. Likes yellow.
No.
Oh, it is a good pollinator.
It's one of the best.
It is a really good.
Want your bees.
Yeah. It's really good. And if you're wanting to get those pollinators in, invite them in with your earliest spring plants and keep them there all summer. and send them happy out with your turtle head in the fall, and just make sure that they have a banquet all season long, and they'll keep coming back to your buffet every single time, rather than just hoping they'll visit your roses in the middle of spring, in the middle of summer. Because if you only want them to visit the one plant, and if there's no reason for them to go for the rest of the time, they may not come to you just that one time of the year. So if you've got a vegetable garden, think about all season flowers to attract the pollinators so they get used to coming to you. Other perennials to consider, your columbines. Again, there's native columbines. Feverfew, which is an herb that some people use for migraines. It tastes absolutely horrendous, and you have to eat it every day if you're going to have it. Otherwise, you take capsules. Pretty little white flowers like little tiny daisies, really cute. Can self-seed quite rigorously all over your garden, so you just deadhead it. Canadian violet is an aggressive plant. I wouldn't suggest it unless you really like Canadian violets. But the violets, they're edible. The flowers are edible. Iris cristata, which are an iris that is short and likes the shade and blooms pretty early, and it's just a cute little runner in your garden. Absolutely. Really just a sweet little plant. Daylilies, of course. If you've got those icky daylilies that just kind of take over your world, put them in the shade. Make them have
Would
a
you like
tough
to take a
time.
few out of here?
No,
as you
thank
go,
you.
Teresa?
No,
We
thank you.
still have
No,
some
thank
more
you.
along that wall in the parking lot.
No, thank you. Your daylilies are edible. Eat those flowers. Yes.
Is the picture there the iris?
That's the iris cristata, yep. Yep. So it only gets like this tall, and it is a little runner. It's really just a sweet little plant. It blooms early summer, late spring. It's really, really sweet. And of course, hostas, from little teeny tiny ones to the monster Empress Wu. I mean, there's huge ones and little ones. Canadian ginger. The Canadian ginger is not glossy. The European ginger is glossy, whichever you prefer. Canadian ginger has beautiful, cute little red flowers. If you've ever crawled in the ground and looked under the leaves, and then you say, how am I ever going to get back up again? And then you crawl to the steps and make your way up that way. Okay, maybe that's only me. But they are pollinated by ants. So why do we have ants in our garden? Well, ants need to pollinate your Canadian ginger. Ants also aerate your soil tremendously. They eat a huge amount of weed seeds. They eat a huge amount of dead animals and dead bugs. So welcome ants into your garden. Other ground covers to consider: the bugleweed, the ajuga, lily of the valley. Okay, maybe not lily of the valley because it takes over the world, but it does smell really, really, really sweet. Sweet woodruff, another beautiful herb. Lamium, pink or white Nancy's, and then the vinca minors, the periwinkles. You guys probably know those. Another fun vine, because again, we need to fill up all 7 spots. Virginia creeper. Virgin's bower, which is just like your sweet autumn clematis, only Virgin's bower blooms in July-ish, and it does not have a fragrance. And your sweet autumn clematis blooms later into the fall and has a beautiful sweet fragrance. But they both have those teeny tiny white flowers, and they get these really cool seed heads. So how beautiful is that? Virgin's bower will die to the ground every year and come back just beautifully. And if you let it self-seed wherever it wants, and it will climb over everything. But it's easily, deadhead it, rip it up. Hey, look, extra weeds, that's not weeds, those are green compost. So you always need some green compost. Yeah, just postpone that. Yeah. And most clematis will actually do fine in the shade. I have yet to run into a clematis that hadn't done well for me in the shade. All of them do well. They may not flower as well, but I was growing clematis like Nellie Moser and Cardinal Rouge and all of those in the shade, and they were doing just fine for me. So that was under a big elm tree. Bees Jubilee, Niobe, Rouge Cardinal. These are a lot of the clematis that I have grown in the shade, and they were just absolutely stunning and gorgeous. Virginia creeper. Okay, maybe you shouldn't grow this because it's really, really aggressive. Everything has its place, and wild grapes. Everything has its place, but the Virginia creeper and the wild grapes are extremely aggressive plants. They are good for the birds and the bees and the butterflies and things like that, but they are really, really aggressive. So go gently with them or watch them carefully. I also like to grow things like azaleas and things like that. Now we're into the shrubs. I love the Light series by the University of Minnesota. Mandarin Lights is this one pictured, and it has the most fragrant, sweet smell. There are times in my yard, the front yard is almost illegal about how good it smells there. I've got the Mandarin Lights and the magnolias and the lilacs and the crabapple, and it's like, oh my gosh, and the roses, and it's just blue. It's so beautiful. Anyway, I digress. But it prefers an acidic soil, so it's easy. We have really high pH soils here. Most of our soils are going to run 8.5. That's really, really, really high. These guys would prefer it down like 6 or 5. So I top dress once in the spring and once in the fall with a handful of soil sulfur. Just grab a handful and toss it on the ground. Same thing with my blueberries, just toss it on the ground. And that seems to work just fine. Azaleas, also like your blueberries, have a very fibrous root system. So they don't have a deep root system. It's a very shallow fibrous root system. So they need to stay moist, so mulch them. And that will keep them nice and moist.
Repeat that again with the azaleas. A handful of soil.
Soil sulfur, yeah. I do a very scientific measured approach. It's 1 handful per plant.
And you do it in the spring?
In the spring and in the fall.
Okay.
It takes about 3 months for that soil sulfur to work its way down to where the plant roots are. And what happens with pH in your plants, if you grow blueberry in a high pH soil, the blueberry is like it has a gastric bypass. It is restricted as what it can grow. There are so few fungus and bacteria in the soil that can bring food to the roots, and there's so little that the roots can get, it's basically starving to death. But once you turn that soil more acidic, those fungi and bacteria that can feed those plants actually then can multiply. So they like to live in that soil. So then your blueberries or your magnolias or your pines or your azaleas or your rhododendrons, they can be healthier. So that's why the pH is so important in soils. Most plants are they're pretty easygoing. They can go from 5 to 7. Most plants are pretty okay. You know, some of them, like your dianthus, they like the 7s. You know, some of them, like your mandarin, the lights, azaleas, they like the 5s. But most of your vegetables, 5 to 7. Most of your house plants, or regular plants, 5 to 7. So they're cool. That's why most plants do just fine. But you're going to run into those plants that like it a little tough, little different, so you have to kind of cater to them.
And pines were considered in there too?
Pines too, yeah. So they'll do okay, but if they start getting stressed, sometimes just give them a handful of tool soil sulfur once or twice a year, and they'll be just a little happier.
What about lilacs?
Lilacs actually prefer a neutral to alkaline soil, even though they grow just fine in like a 5.5, 6. But they actually prefer just a titch, moderate, neutral to alkaline. White lights azalea, tips for double blooming. Lots of times, you get your azaleas or your rhododendrons and they start getting spindly. There's a way you can get twice as much blooms every single year. As the flowers start to die back, you just pinch the flower right at the base. There's 2 tiny little growing points. By pinching that flower as it starts to fade, you activate those growing points. They will set flowers next year. So next year you'll have 2, then 4, then 8, then 16, and so on and so on and so on, like that commercial, that hair commercial. So if you can do a few years of pinching, you can really get your plants to be fuller and bushier and not these scraggly, awful looking one flower. Oh joy, I get 1 rhododendron bloom. This is like a white lights that's just covered every year. It also gets covered with sawfly larvae every year. And every year I mean to go out there and be proactive, and I'm out there, then a week or 2 slides by and I go back and I go, oh look, it now has no more leaves and it's full of sawfly poop. Oh joy. Because they got it. They're the little green worms. They look a lot like the ones on roses. They're little tiny green worms that you don't see until you see them. Then you see them everywhere. But they come and they go and they eat and then they're gone, and they don't hurt the plants. They're healthy. So I just figure it just helps the plants to be tougher. I make my plants tough. Shrubs for dry shade, viburnums. Lots of your viburnums are native. They can handle it really well. Witch hazel, another good shrub for a dry shade. Small tree, large shrub, small tree. Dogwoods, your dogwoods, wonderful for hills. They like to sucker, they like to run. They can hold your banks really well. Chokeberries, the aronias. Aronias are native. They get they get white flowers. They get these glossy, glossy leaves, little white flowers. They're just absolutely beautiful. Then they get the berries, and the berries turn a deep blue purple. And they're so astringent that nothing in nature takes them until they've gone through a bunch of freezes and thaws. But you can pick them and throw them into vodka and let them macerate, and then add a bunch of simple syrup to the vodka and strain it off. And you have this aronia juice. If you go into any fancy health food shop and buy some fancy juice and you look on it, you'll see that it has aronia juice. It's extremely high in vitamin C. It's one of the new cool juices. And you can grow it in your backyard. But the berries themselves are so astringent, you'll probably be puckered for a week after if you just did it. Serviceberry, amelanchier, tastes like blueberries. And if you can get to them before the birds do, they are absolutely delicious. Bottlebrush, it's really hard to find, but sometimes you can find it. Shrubby St. John's worts and snowberries. Snowberries are really cute too. They're little teeny tiny white flowers, but they have a blue-green foliage that adds that little interest to your yard. They can sucker, so they can sucker and turn into a thicket for you. This is under a cherry tree. Yes, there's 2 cherry trees there in my backyard. Again, I'm a messy gardener, so I just throw in everything. We have lily turf, the turtle head's way in the back there. We've got ginger and violets all over the place. But I like things to fill up, because when the plants are filling up, there's no room for weeds. And I don't have to water, because they're protecting the soil, and they create their own little humidity, and so they kind of keep self-watering themselves all summer long.